Hi. How are you?
So good. I am so excited about this, Julie. I just you have changed my life and I know how busy you are and
Oh,
I can't thank you enough for doing this. I really can't.
are you kidding? It's my honor and
Oh,
delight. You look like a movie star. You
really?
look,
It's the ring light. I would love it. I think it would be fascinating for people to just hear a little bit about your background because you went from this successful businesswoman to a psychic, and I think that will just open people's eyes to I don't know, I just feel like there's so many stereotypes and um expectations and just ideas that we have around people that are psychic. And I mean, the majority of the time, it's not someone that you're thinking. It's just another mom living, her normal life. So I would love if you could just share how this all came about.
yeah, I've never worn a magic turban and I've never had a crystal ball.
Right.
It's always time. Maybe I'll get both. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
A crystal ball would be cool just to
crystal
have.
ball,
Put it on
absolutely.
display.
So as you mentioned, I'm an entrepreneur and an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world, and I learned how to do woo woo, and I'm a buffet of psychicness. So as you know, once we connect with spirit, we can do it all. There's no reason to segregate it. It's like in the medical business. You got the psychics, and then you got the pet psychics, and then you got the medical healers, the intuitive healers, and then you got the past life people. It's like once you connect with spirit, you can do it all. And
Yes.
that's with my private clients, which I do many a day. Our appointments, I will cover a plethora of things. It will be medical and then talk to a deceased loved one and then a past life thing. And so it makes it really fun and it's always different, which makes it a ball. But how I got into this was about 30 years ago. I have a girlfriend who gave me a book called Anatomy of the Spirit by Carolyn Mace, who called herself a medical intuitive. And I thought, what the heck is that? I'd never heard that term before. And I'd been in the medical business on the supply side for a while at that point,
Mm.
spent 30 plus years in that industry, among others. And so I wanted to know more. And back then, Allie, we didn't have the internet yet.
Yeah, right.
So I did the old fashioned thing and I went to a bookstore primarily because I thought the library is probably not going to have much on this, but a bookstore may have more. So I went to a Barnes and Noble and found a book called Hands of Light by Barbara Brennan,
Mm,
who was a NASA physicist
yes.
and former NASA physicist who parlayed very complex quantum physics principles into understandable English for the non scientific mind. And that would be me, the non scientific mind. And so I read her book, and she used quantum physics to help facilitate healing.
Mm,
And that really fascinated me because I'd been in the healing industry, helping medical providers primarily through devices. And I thought, all right, this is something that I want to explore more. So I called her school. She's deceased now, but I called her school and I said, "Do you guys have anybody in my area teaching this stuff?" And lo and behold, they did. And so I studied with one of their graduates for 6 years
mm,
and paid the equivalent of what I would have paid to get an MD or a PhD.
mhm.
All the while, my family and friends were saying, "Why are you doing this?" I'd say, "I don't know." Like once a week, we had a class. What are you going to do with it? I was like, again, no clue. I may not do anything with it. I just find
Right.
it interesting.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's how it all came about. And now here, all these decades later, I'm doing it full time and have been for about the last 6 or 7 years, but I've been doing it for 30 years, just not with the same numbers of people as I am now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your hands are full. And that's something else that I think is amazing too. You are so hands-on for how busy you are. It's unbelievable. I mean, I've taken a lot of classes throughout this whole thing, and usually you don't even see or speak to the instructor. Usually it's just like videos that they'll throw out. And I mean, you just are, you're so hands-on, and you do have help, but even that, I mean, you're in all the email threads. I mean, I'm not kidding. You stood out amongst all of them in a way that is hard to explain. Like truly, I never felt alone when I was taking your classes. Or I mean, yeah, it truly, it's amazing. I don't know if you realize that, but
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah,
it's
it's a lot to put it all together, but you got to remember I'm a businesswoman
yes,
coming at it.
yeah,
So I'm really good at creating systems and
yeah,
then overseeing things and bringing people in who are really good at the things that I'm perhaps not as good at, but it gives me the opportunity to do what I love, which is working with the individuals, not only in my classes, but also as clients. And that's what makes it so fun. And it's just a joy. It's the most fun thing I've ever done of all. And I've founded 9 companies, as you know, in 5
yes.
industries. And this is by far the most fun.
Where it's
And
at.
I don't have a business plan for this.
Yes. Well,
I
I
don't,
mean, how can you? You know, this is something that I talk to my mom about a lot. And you know, you think about when you're a child and you know, daydreaming about what you want to be and all those things. And for me, it was, I always had a feeling of what I wanted that to be, or what I thought that would be, but there were never any words for it. And I mean, that's because at when I was a child, like this was a podcast wasn't a thing. Talking about aliens wasn't a thing. Talking about dead people, deceased loved ones, that wasn't, you know what I mean? It just wasn't a thing. And if there's anything I've taken away from all of this, it's what we are capable of creating, and how we really should always just be in a state of constant creation. And like to your point, it's I think we're gonna start seeing it become more of a norm to not really have such a plan, a detailed plan, I guess. Not even just regarding business, but a lot of things. I think we're going to realize that that flow is really the state we're supposed to be in. So that makes total sense.
well, and we're all creating by default, whether we
Yes,
realize it or not. You get up in the morning, "Well,
yes,
what am I going to wear? I'm going to create an outfit. How am
yes,
I going to get to work? What's on my schedule today? How am I going to create, all of that and what needs to be accomplished in those meetings and stuff." And I think it's a matter of, I always think of Steve Jobs when
mm,
he first released the iPod and then the iPhone and the iPad and all of that. And
yes,
somebody was interviewing him and they said, "Well, did you do a bunch of focus groups on this to come up with what your design was?" And he said, "No."
mm,
And they said, "Why not?" And he said, "Because a lot of the time we don't know what we want because we're not familiar with it.
yes,
So when we're creating, we come up with things as they are presented to us." And all of that, as you know from taking my class, they're all divine downloads.
yes,
They're all messages coming from spirit. And it's a matter of doing things in a different way, perhaps. And to your point earlier, when I was young and in school, I thought I'd just rise the ranks of a big corporation and be an executive and that would be it. Well, I started my first company at 25 and I've been self-employed ever since. So obviously
yes,
that was what I thought, but I didn't I didn't have any idea that this was going to take
yes.
place. And it's been an interesting ride and fun.
I would love, there's a couple of things from your books that I would like to talk about, but I think it might make a little bit more sense to. I definitely want, there's so many people right now in a state of, we were talking about this earlier, a state of fear and angst. And I would love if you could talk about just fear in general and what isn't fear, because most most things that we are afraid of isn't even something that we need to worry about. So if you could talk about that and your 2-minute rule, I think that alone will fascinate a lot of people and help them as well.
Yeah, it's a game changer,
It
the
is.
2 minute rule. When that came in, I thought, whoa, okay, Spirit, this is going to be a game changer for me and for anybody that hears about it. When we have a thought that comes into our heads, it doesn't have a meaning until we give it a meaning. You have that beautiful purple, royal purple top on.
Mhm.
And I look at that and I think, oh, gorgeous, gorgeous color. Well, somebody that doesn't like purple is
Yeah.
thinking, ugh,
Yeah.
why is she wearing that color? But it's a thought. It's the same thought. Oh, Allie's wearing purple. One person has a thought that is fabulous, another person has a thought that it's not. So when we have a thought that comes into our head, it doesn't have a meaning. We give it a meaning. Thoughts that feel good are based in love. For the most part, they're accurate. Thoughts that feel badly are always based in fear. 100% of the time, anything that feels bad is based in fear. So, anger, jealousy, boredom, grief, actual fear, whatever, anything that feels bad is based in fear. The key is it a real fear or is it a fake fear? A real fear is something that's going to harm us or kill us, change the conditions before it does. That's called a rational fear. An irrational fear is everything else, and that is 99.9% of the thoughts that we think. So the key is being able to differentiate between the two. Here's how you do it. When you have a thought that comes in that feels badly, you just ask yourself, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? And it's a yes or no answer in this game. Yes, but this could happen, blah, blah, blah. That's not valid. You would get a big, nope, that's not a qualified answer. So, yes or no? If the answer is yes, then that's a rational fear. Get out of the road before the truck runs you over, because that's going to either harm you or kill you. If the answer is no, you know that's an irrational fear and it's fake. It's fake news. I love that term with
Mhm.
this application.
Yes.
Fake news. So, what happens when we go into fear is we go into fight or flight. It's an autonomic nervous system response.
Mm.
We don't even think about it. The body just immediately goes there. The blood drains from our heads, goes to our hearts and our extremities because we need to run away from whatever the perceived fear is. And we lose clarity.
Mm.
Our heart rate goes up, our cortisol levels go up, norepinephrine, all those stress chemicals, and we're in fear. So then what happens when we're in fear, and we all do this, is especially if it's an irrational fear, we'll think, well, if that happens, then that's going to happen, then that's going to happen, then that's going to happen. And before long, we've dug ourselves this black hole of
Mm.
imagined things that most likely will never happen, and we suffer over them.
Yeah.
And we stay in that constant state of fight or flight. And it's a huge issue.
Yes.
So, 2 minute rule, is this going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? Yes or no? The other beauty with the 2 minute rule is it's free, it's
Yeah.
convenient, it works anywhere your brain is. Your brain's usually with you wherever you are, right? That's how I
Usually.
think about it, right? And it works in every situation.
Yes. Yeah.
You can use it unlimited times a day. You can use it
Mhm.
500 times in a day or more. And
Yeah.
little kids really get this.
Yes.
When we teach little kids now in my children's book, Angel Messages for Truth, it's, is this going to hurt me in the next 2 minutes? Is
Mm.
the version for kids. But little kids sometimes get this even before grown-ups do.
I mean, it when you leave it in such simple terms as to asking yourself, is this going to kill me? It you truly just realize that again, everything, almost everything we think, 99% of it is not something we need to be worried about. And what's interesting is not only does your 2-minute rule clear your head and get it just thinking properly and healthy, what it's doing to your body is on another level too, because when you are in fight or flight, you're constantly contracting. And I mean, for your body to be in a constant state of stress is, I believe, why we're seeing so many of our diseases and all of that and body pain. And I mean, this just, this cures so much.
And a lot of the time you're going to laugh. You're going to
Yes.
think, oh, for God's sakes,
Yes.
I'll say to myself, quit being a drama queen here. And then it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
So when I have a thought that feels badly now, because it's
Mhm.
been so many years since I've been doing this, I immediately go into the 2-minute rule. And
Yes.
I ask, is this going to kill you? And this is going to kill me in the next 2 minutes? No, if I'm running late to go, pick up something at the sporting goods store before it closes, I can get it tomorrow.
Yes.
And to your point, it's really well taken, because when we're in a constant state of stress, it causes inflammation, and
Mhm.
chronic inflammation is the
Mhm.
root of all
Yes.
illness and disease.
Yes.
And so, yeah.
Mm, I love it. It's so helpful. So helpful. Um, I would love if you could talk about the 12 stages. I just think we have so many false beliefs regarding death and the time leading up to it, what happens after all of it. And I mean, your research, what you've seen, the families you've changed. I mean, this isn't a one-off. This is something that you've had experience with time and time again. It's incredible. And I would love for you to talk about that.
Well, the 12 phases of transition is what I call what
Yes.
happens when
Yes.
somebody's dying. And it's a series of events involving angels and the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as the person is approaching death. Because, Allie, I found that there's a lot of information about the afterlife.
Mm,
There's a lot of information about near death experiences. There's a lot of information about how to grieve. But what's the one thing everybody's the most afraid of? What's going to happen as they're dying and when they actually die?
yes.
And so we all think, especially in the Judeo Christian cultures in the Western world, are we going to fly or are we going to fry when we
Yes.
die? And so everybody goes to heaven. Everybody goes to heaven, which is totally opposite of what most of us have been taught.
Mm,
But we saw what happens when people use fear to control the masses with the pandemic.
yes.
I mean,
Yes.
people did stupid stuff.
Hmm.
So what happens is, as somebody's dying, the spirit exits through the top of the head and it holds on. It looks like a speech bubble or a cartoon caption bubble where the character's thoughts or words are what they're
Hmm.
speaking. And then the first spirit to show up is the maternal spirit. If your mother's still alive, it's going to be your maternal grandmother. If she's still alive, it's going to be her mother. Now that surprised me.
Mm.
I thought it would be a guardian angel or
Mhm.
some kind of angel that maybe God had an air traffic control division in heaven and it was dispatching angels to help people, while they were dying. That is true, but it's the maternal spirit that brings them in. That
Mm.
was a surprise to me. It's the mother spirit that's running the show from the spirit world. The second spirit to come in is the paternal spirit. So the father of the person who's dying. If the father's still alive, it's going to be the maternal grandfather. It's always on the maternal line. And then what happens is these angels come in, and with the maternal and paternal spirit anchoring, let's say the dying person's in a bed. So they're anchoring at the person's feet, the dying person's feet. And then these angels form a circle with those two mother and father spirits that are the anchor of that circle. And angels look to me, Allie, I went through 12 years of Catholic schools. So I
Yeah.
was taught angels are big, they got big wings, they're going to be in a white gown, belted at the waist with a rope and bare feet and all that jazz. Is that what angels really look like to me?
Yeah.
Because that's how I was taught they look. Somebody growing up in an indigenous culture in the middle of the Amazon may see angels that are just a blob of purple energy or
Mm.
something like that. So spirits are always going to show up in a way that we're going to be able to identify who they are or what their purpose is or that kind of a thing. And it's going to come in through our personal frame of reference. I see Catholic schoolgirl angels, somebody in a tribe sees it as a totally different thing.
Yes.
As the dying person gets closer and closer to death, that circle of angels opens up into a horseshoe, again, with the mother and father spirit still anchoring in the middle. And that horseshoe broadens and then eventually is a straight line across the foot of the bed, let's say, in this situation. And as the person is progressing through the phases, spirits of deceased loved ones come in, spirits of people with whom they've been associated in many different lifetimes arrive as well.
Mm.
And how I know they're from different lifetimes is they'll be in different period dress. Like you may have somebody dressed in Renaissance attire. And I've never seen somebody from the Renaissance with one of those big turkey legs, that they're chewing on, like at the Renaissance fairs. Never seen that. I'm hoping I will one day though. And then I can see somebody from the 60s, like a woman in a mini skirt and go-go boots. And so also spirits of deceased pets show up.
Mm.
And it can be dogs, cats, bunnies, whatever. When I have somebody who's dying or somebody who's a graduate of my class and they're seeing this in their mind's eye, and maybe they'll see farm animals. And I'll say, did your grandmother grow up on a farm or does she live on a farm now? Because there'll be horses and chicks and ducks and pigs and cows. And
It's so cool to me. I
it's
love animals. So this
hilarious.
part of it just fascinates me.
It's hilarious. The first time I saw that, I thought, what? And then, and I found out that the elderly woman who was dying, I was talking with her daughter. I said, there's all these farm animals in there. And she said, well, that makes perfect sense because my mom grew up on a farm.
Mm.
And I started describing the animals. And she said, well, that was her cow, Bessie. That was her pet. And that was her collie, whatever. And her horse, Trigger. And they can name them as I describe these
Wow.
animals that are there. So between the angels and the people spirits, the spirits of deceased loved ones and others from all past lives, as well as the pets, I call them the Welcome to Heaven Committee. And at the end, Allie, there's thousands of them.
Yes.
They look like dots on the horizon. I mean,
Mhm.
thousands of them. And how amazing is that? Nobody dies
Yes.
alone ever,
Oh.
ever. I think it's important to remember too that time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time's a human creation. So, regardless of how somebody dies, whether they die instantly in the case of a homicide or suicide, or whether they die over a prolonged period of time, days, weeks, months, even years, they all go through the 12 phases of transition. Can
Mm.
be in less than a nanosecond, can be over an extended period of time.
That's one of the most fascinating things I found was I mean, this, depending on what's happening, whether they're dealing with an illness or whatever, it's crazy to me that with some of your clients, they experience the first stage a year out, and some of them it's the day before they pass. It's
Right.
fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And does it make sense to us from our human perspective? No. Will we understand it when we get to heaven?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I believe we will. So, a couple of nuances that I think are worth mentioning. Number one, about phase 5, 6-ish, there are two additional angels that show up and they are on either side of the spirit bubble. Again, that's exited, but still hanging on the dying person's head, at the top of their head. And I thought the first time I saw any of this was when my own mother was dying.
Mm.
And I saw them show up and I thought, it's going to be interesting. Wonder what I knew that they were going to help in the dying process, but I had no idea how. Because I'd never been with anybody before
Mhm.
when they were actually dying. My grandmothers had died, but I wasn't with them
Mm.
at the end. And I was with my mother. She lived in Ohio. We live in Alabama, so we drove all night to get to her. And so I kind of felt like a little bit of a schizo because
Yeah,
um, on
sure.
one side, my heart's breaking because my mother's
Mm.
dying. And on the other side, I'm seeing all this angelic stuff going on and all these spirits entering the room and these animals. I mean, pets that we had when I was a small child that I hadn't thought of in,
Wow.
God, 30 years. And their spirits were there. Funny story about that. One of my dear friends from childhood who knew all these pets, when I was talking to her on the phone as my mother was, I think maybe as my mother was dying, I was talking to her late in the day and on a little bit of a break. And I said, "Oh my God, Frosty and Rummy are in there," which were our childhood dogs. And she's a lawyer. And so she told her mom, she said, "Julie wouldn't lie about that. She wouldn't make that up." And I said, "Yeah, the thought wouldn't have occurred to me that I would have made
I
that up."
wouldn't even know to make that up.
Well, I know. It was like, so that's number one, that these two extra angels show up. And then between phase 9 and phase 10, their wings start to move. And they reminded me of a giant owl and
Mm.
how, if you've ever seen a documentary on a giant owl, those wings move and they're so massive and they're
Yes.
silent and they're rhythmic. And you can almost feel the drag that they're pulling
Mm.
as they're flying. And that's what it felt like in the room with these angels. Well, before long, that went on for hours before I saw anything that was occurring as a result of that. And then all of a sudden, I started seeing a vortex beginning to form. And I could see it, Ellie. I could feel it. It felt
Mm.
like driving through a car wash at the end when the dryers turned on and it's sucking all the water off your
Yeah.
car, as you're getting ready to exit the car wash. And then this vortex got stronger. I could see it, I could feel it, I could hear it. And I thought, okay, this is really getting interesting now. All along with my mother, she was in a hospice facility for less than 48 hours for about, yeah, maybe a day and a half. And when we got there, the nurses were saying she's coming from the hospital. She's well hydrated. She's going to probably be with us for at least a couple of weeks. And so as the day progressed and I was seeing all this, I'm thinking, no way, there's not a chance that's
Mm.
going to happen. So that movement of the wings is what causes the vortex. And it's what the spirit goes through. Spirits that have talked about when they're in heaven, what they went through, or even near death experience people, a lot of them talk about going through a vortex, going through a tunnel. That's what they're going through when
Mm.
they see that. And then once their spirit has detached from the body, then those angels escort the spirit to heaven.
Mm.
And heaven looks to me like this big, huge, brilliant, yellowish, whitish plasma wall. And when they go through it, all those deceased loved ones' spirits that were in the room, they're all on the other side of the plasma wall, which is the
Mm.
pearly gates, if you will. And there's this roar that goes up that sounds like somebody's just scored a touchdown at a football game of 100,000 people in the stands.
Mm.
And it's the Welcome to Heaven committee that's there. And it's just like, she's here. Oh my gosh, welcome, welcome. And it's just really remarkable. I have a client, we were talking with her dad's spirit in heaven, and he was talking about it was so funny. He was talking about that he was seeing the phases. He could see some of them even though he couldn't communicate at the end of life verbally. And he said, it was like a magic trick. He
Yeah.
said, all those spirits that were in the room then were in heaven when I got to heaven. He said it was like putting one of those, girls in the box and they
Yeah.
spin the box and hit it with the magic wand. And then they open the box and she's gone. And then they make her come back. He said it was the best magic trick I've ever seen,
Yes.
which was
Yes.
hilarious.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. Couple
My
of
sis-
other interesting points, if I may.
Yes.
When I was writing angelic attendants, what really happens as we transition from this life into the next, I was led to just do an internet search on
Mm.
wings, owl vortex. Owl wing vortex is what I put in. Just to find out there's this thing called the wingtip vortex that is a phenomenon, aeronautical phenomenon that happens where these vortices form underneath the wings of anything that flies, a jet, a plane, a bird, a bug, a kite, even. And it's what causes lift.
Wow.
And if you Google wingtip vortex, you will find hundreds of thousands of, if not more, aeronautical engineering drawings about this, pictures of wingtip vortices, articles about it. It's
Mm.
every pilot that's ever flown a plane knows about the wingtip vortex. And I thought, holy schmoly, these angels from the spirit world are creating a phenomenon in our
Yes.
reality that I can see, I can feel, and I can hear. And it causes in the human world, in our reality, the spirit to separate from the body. I mean, how amazing is
Yeah.
that?
Yes.
And then the other thing that's important in my research on this was Catholic again, at the end of every Catholic funeral, Roman Catholic funeral, there's a prayer called In Paradisum said. And In Paradisum in Latin translates into paradise. And it talks about how your loved ones and the angels will greet you and lead you into paradise. And at my mother's funeral, I thought, oh my goodness, that's what I saw.
Yes.
That's what this is crazy. So perhaps it took till the 5th century till
Mm-hmm.
somebody was well educated enough
Mm-hmm.
to be able to read and write.
Mm.
And certainly some of the most learned people were men
Mm.
living in monasteries and synagogues. So I have to think there was some little monk
Yes.
that wrote down what everybody has seen since the beginning of time.
Yes.
And as we've become more well educated, a lot of this spiritual stuff and the, a lot of the cultures and stuff like that have been lost, and we've gone to a proof based way of thinking.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And so now I think we're swinging back, and university based research shows that 90% of people at the end of their lives see the spirits of deceased loved ones and pets as as they're
Yes.
dying in the last, can be up to 6 months, and they appear in dreams and in visions, and the people find them very comforting. So it's important to know that, because when grandma is talking about her mother who's been dead for 60 years,
Mhm.
we used to think, well, grandma's just hallucinating. Grandma's not hallucinating. Grandma can actually see her
Yes.
mother whose spirit's in the room.
Yes. And everything you are saying is literally, we've had a lot of death in my family. Um, but my mom's mom was one of the first to go, and we were all very close to her, and we all lived close to her at that time. So visiting her in the hospital and all of that was very normal. And Julie, I'm not kidding. I cannot tell you how many times my grandma would say something and all of us would look at each other like they've given her too much medication, clearly, or you know what I mean? And I'm not kidding. Like, I watched her go through these stages, not
Yeah,
knowing what they were at the time, and
right.
then reading your book and taking your class. I was just like, oh my gosh, it just validated so much and clarified so much. And I mean, the feeling that I had while reading and studying, it was just like, this is real. This
Yeah.
is real. I watched this 20 years ago with my grandmother, and now I'm reading about it.
Mhm.
And this has been reported by how many people? I mean, it's incredible. It really is incredible.
Well, and it's so comforting
Yes.
because especially during COVID. Oh
Yeah.
my goodness, so many people that couldn't be with their loved ones, that were in hospitals or nursing homes, that were locked down,
Yes.
and their relatives that are left behind have suffered so horribly with, oh, I couldn't be with my
Yes.
mother when she passed and she died alone. Well, it's important to remember nobody ever dies alone. We're all surrounded by angels and the spirits of loved ones and the spirits of our beloved pets as well.
Yeah.
Another funny story, if I may share how I even came about getting this information out. One day I was with my mentor and she was doing a healing on me. And when I'm in her office, it used to be, now we do it via Zoom, but it used to be when I was in her office, uh, I'd be on a massage table face up with a blankie on, all snuggly and everything. And she'd be doing an energetic healing on me. And my deceased loved one's spirits are lining both sides of the table and
Wow.
they're participating. Even my little dog, Katie, has her little paws on the table and she's on her
Oh.
hind legs and she's participating. She was a half German Shepherd, half Keeshond, and was my favorite of all of my dogs. So one day, this spirit of this dead Pope shows up. He's got the hat on, Allie. He's got the shepherd's rod, the vestments, the whole 9 yards. And I said, well, who are you? And he said, well, I'm Clement. And I said, I never heard of a Pope Clement. And he kind of laughed and he said, well, I was number 6. And I said, okay, how may I help you? And I'm thinking to myself, why is this guy here? Why is this spirit in my room all of a sudden? And my mentor, Susan, could see him too. So he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies.
Mm.
I didn't even take a breath. And I said, I'm not doing that. I'm a
You're in the
businesswoman.
wrong room, Clement.
I'm like, buddy, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman. People will think I'm nuts. And he said, yeah, yeah, yeah. He was laughing. And he said, no, actually, everything you've done in your life has prepared you for this.
Mm.
And people are so afraid to die. And it's glorious. There
Yeah.
is no reason. I mean, it's glorious. Doesn't mean you got to do it today,
Right, right.
but there's nothing to fear. And
Wow.
he went on to say this has been so bastardized over the
Mm.
millennia. And he said, you know what happens. You need to teach everybody what happens. And I said, yeah, again, thanks so much. Have a nice day. I'm not doing that. So I leave Susan's office. I get in the car to drive 3 hours home. And just for kicks, I did an internet search on my phone on Pope Clement VI. Allie, come to find out, this guy was in office during the Black Plague.
Wow.
He's best known, when 2/3 of Europe died.
I
He's,
don't remember that. Okay.
yeah.
Wow.
And
Wow.
he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead.
I remembered you had looked him up and he was a real person, and I did not realize it was during the plague.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And I thought, oh my God, Ryan, you can't make that up.
No, no.
And so it took another couple of years before I had the golden ovary courage because guys have breast balls, girls have golden
I
ovaries.
love that you say that.
And I thought I live in the deep south. I mean, somebody's gonna come burn a cross in my front yard or
Yeah.
something. And it's never happened. And the stories of people of how much comfort this
Mm.
has brought to them and their families, both when they have a loved one who's dying and also after the loved one has passed, to the point now where there are many, many churches of all denominations that give my book to every family that comes in to plan a
Mm.
funeral,
Mm.
and synagogues too. And, I
Yeah.
mean, I just, again, you just can't make this stuff up.
No, no, not at all. In fact, I have probably recommended your book to more people who have lost pets that they just, I mean, I'm an animal lover and I've done a lot of work with them. So I just know a lot of people that are just obsessed with their pets and animals. And I think it's easier for people to believe in heaven for their loved ones, but I mean, animals are just not talked about. And I think it just, we're left, it's just a different kind of grief, I feel like. And Um, it's different, but very similar as well. And I can't tell you how many people who have lost their dog, or I would send them your book, and they say this better not be some gimmick, or and I wouldn't send someone who's just lost someone a book that I didn't believe in. And all of them have come back, later down the road, and just it's changed their life. I mean, it really is incredible. I love if you could talk about the questions that you ask um those when they are passing. There's three, right? Am I remembering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think
Yeah.
that is so helpful. And I mean, for everyone, the family and the person that's it just makes the questions that you ask make so much sense. I mean, it makes sense that they're waiting on those things before they leave.
Yeah. The three questions are you ready to go? It's yes or no. Are you in pain? Because if they're in pain, we can help them with
Mhm.
that, especially if hospice is involved. We
Yes.
don't want them to be in pain. And what do you need? And their answer to what do you need just goes the gamut from can I have a piece of chocolate cake with some ice cream on it to I did have a guy who was dying and I was talking to his son and his son was going to go see him after we were done on the phone and so I asked his dad, I said, well, what do you need? And he said, can you have him bring me a piece of chocolate cake with some ice cream? A la mode would be great. It was hilarious. Come to find out, that's his favorite dessert.
Oh.
And, at the end of life, feed them what they want to eat. What the
Yes.
heck? Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So there's that to I need a sweater, to I need to see
Mm,
somebody. One of the I need to see, and I have thousands of stories, as you can imagine.
yeah.
But one of my favorites is I was working with a family in Athens, Greece, and the father was dying, and he had not been able to communicate for weeks
Mm.
verbally and was seemed to be in a coma. So I asked him, what do you need? And he said, I need to see my sister. And so I said to his wife, who was on the phone with me, I said, can you bring his sister over? Does he have a sister? She said, oh, yeah. And I said, can you bring her over? And she said, well, it's kind of tough because she's in Australia. And I
Mm.
said, well, get her on the Zoom or do a FaceTime or something like that. And they did. And he died quickly thereafter. Yeah.
Have
So
you seen that people will also, instead of waiting for someone to come, do they oftentimes wait for someone to leave? Like my aunt, she didn't want me to see her passing. She wanted me to see her when she was still somewhat vibrant. And I would assume that there's people that are actually waiting for some to leave so that they aren't actually there for it. Does that happen a lot?
many, many,
Wow.
many, many, many. Yeah. My Mima, my beloved grandmother, I was with her, and then my sister and her husband were with her after I left the hospital. And I got back to my parents' house, and half an hour later, she passed. She didn't want anybody with her. She didn't want anybody to do that. But she had prayed for 20 years that she would go in her sleep.
Wow.
20 years. So God granted her that wish.
Wow.
My own mother, I was the only one with her. Everybody was on the way. It was at 5 in the morning, and she didn't want him there. And she was struggling at the end with her breathing. And I have a friend who's an ER nurse that told me later she just wasn't medicated
Yeah.
enough. So
Yeah.
she was, it was not pretty.
Yeah.
And I do think that she knew I could see what was going on. And I've been in enough medical situations where,
Mm.
yeah, it was disturbing, but
Yeah.
but I could see what her spirit was doing and I could see the angels and all the deceased loved
Mm.
ones and everything. And so I think that it would have been really traumatic for my siblings and their spouses and my dad even to have been there when that was going on. So
Yeah.
I understand that now. Even to the point where the nurses that were in the room with me, there were two nurses that were in the room with me at the end with my mom, and I was kneeling to her right and holding her hand. And the nurses said, okay, she's stopped breathing. I said, yeah, but her spirit hasn't left yet. And they honored me with that
Mm.
because they'd kept telling me for hours, she's coming around for a long, at least a couple of weeks. I said, nah, I don't think so. That's not what I'm seeing. So I spent the night and uh, I said, well, how will we know when the end is near? And they said, well, her breathing will become labored and her feet will start to turn blue. That's what happened. I went out to the nurse's station. I said, I think you need to get in here. And they said, you're right. And so we called the family and they arrived about 10 minutes after she passed. She didn't want them there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Yeah.
Absolutely does. Um, I would love if we could really quickly, I just any insight or anything else that you can stress regarding pets and animals. I think I anything you can talk about, or even if you can explain how there's really no, I mean, when you're talking about things from on an energetic level or a conscious level, it makes sense that there really is no difference at the end of the day in terms of your ability to be able to communicate with animals, what they want, all of that. Can you kind of explain what's happening and how we are able to communicate with people that have passed, as well as how this is even possible with animals, even animals that are living? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, and one point too that I want to mention about people who've lost a beloved pet is sometimes it feels more intense. And
Yes.
even losing somebody, especially if they don't live with you,
Yes.
when you're losing somebody who lives in a different city or state or country versus losing a pet that's with you all the
Your
time,
shadow.
even if,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
your shadow. And that's so much harder when my family members died and the ones left behind that lived in the same city, I think they suffered way more than those of
Yeah.
us that lived far away because we didn't see them all
Yeah.
the time. And then let's just ramp it up with a spouse or, God forbid, a
Mm,
child and
mm,
a pet.
mm.
And people say, well, it's just a pet. Well, it's still, the grief is still as intense
Yeah.
as that. So, how this works is we raise our vibrational level to the level of spirit because all spirits are attached to a body having a human experience or a pet experience,
Hmm.
right? And as we're attached to a body, we vibrate more slowly simply because the body has mass. And so by learning to raise my vibrational level, which is what you learned how to do in my class, that's what I teach my
Hmm.
students, we're able to communicate with spirit because we're on the spirit frequency. It's kind of like we're tuned to the spirit radio station. And so our heads are like big satellite dishes and they receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. So it doesn't matter if they've reincarnated or not. We're going after their spirit. We're connecting to their spirit. And it's irrelevant whether we knew them or not in
Mm.
a past life. Who do you want to talk to? Your dead grandma? You want to talk to Elvis? You want to talk to, Adam and
No
Eve?
limit.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, you just think of them. That tunes our satellite dish head to their frequency. And it opens up something similar, Allie, to a two-way radio
Yes.
where we can communicate with them. And you just say something to them, either aloud or in your head. You can ask a question, you can make a statement, and they're going to answer you. And how you know that it's them answering you, it's going to feel like a thought in your head. How you know it's them is it's that first thing, fast as you can snap your fingers, that comes into your head, whether it makes
Mm.
sense to you or not.
Right. Right. And
And that
usually,
takes
a lot of times,
practice.
it doesn't make sense.
Exactly. A lot
Yeah.
of the times it doesn't because they're translating from spirit to human.
Yes.
So it's that first thing. And if it doesn't make sense to you, just be open to the
Yes.
interpretation. It
Yeah.
may make sense to you later that day when you think about it. It may
Yes.
pertain to something that hasn't happened yet.
Yes.
And different spirits are going to communicate differently. Some spirits will send a sign or a symbol, other spirits will give us like sentences of
Yes.
answers to
Yes.
things. And even those you
Interpret.
need to be open to the interpretation.
Hmm. Hmm.
Here are a couple of examples, if I may.
Please.
Recently, I had a mom and we were talking as a client, and we were talking with her deceased son's spirit in heaven. And she said to him, well, can you send me a sign when you're around me? And I get that a lot. A lot of
Mhm.
people want a sign. And, yes, you got butterflies. Yeah, you got unicorns and rainbows and stuff like that. But the signs can be really random. And as we mentioned earlier, we get that thought in our head and we're thinking, really?
Right.
Really? That's your sign? But then it makes total sense to the
Yeah.
person with whom we're working. Here's
Yes.
an example of that. He said, yeah, mom, every time you see a surfboard, know I'm around you. And she said, a surfboard? We live in Kansas. There
Mhm.
are no oceans around us. There's no place to surf around us. He didn't surf. Why a surfboard? And
Huh.
I said, again, be open. You may see a picture of a surfboard. You may see an
Mhm.
ad with a surfboard in
Mhm.
it. You
Mhm.
may read a story about a surfboard or watch a movie. And then she gasped and she started cracking up. She was laughing. And I said, what? And she said, I have a surfboard on my keychain.
Wow.
I said, well, what he's telling you is every time you
Yes.
look at that keychain or you hold that keychain, know that he's with you.
Wow. Wow.
Random, random.
Very random. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Wow.
knew she lived in the middle of the country. I knew she didn't live near an ocean, but I thought, well, maybe he, did at one point. So that's an example of a symbol, and I've got thousands of examples of that. An example of a story is, and this is recent too, we were talking again to a deceased son's spirit in heaven. His mom and I were having a conversation, and he was talking about, he said, he was telling me about blueberries. He said, I loved the blueberries and they were fun and frightening at the same time. So that's a sentence that I heard in my head from her son's spirit. And I thinking, what's frightening about blueberries?
Right.
It makes sense to me, but I don't edit anything I get. I've learned over the years. I'm
Yeah.
just the
Yeah.
messenger.
Yes.
Oh, I said, does that mean anything to you? And she said, oh, yeah. We had a cabin when the kids were little. It was out in the middle of the woods and it had a blueberry patch. And the kids used to pick blueberries all the time and they loved it. And I said, well, so what's frightening about that? I'm thinking, are there snakes that you're watching out for or whatever? And she said, no, bear. And I
Mhm.
said, what? And she said, bears love blueberries. So when the
Oh,
kids were picking blueberries, we were all watching for the bear to make sure that no bears came around. And so that's what her son was doing. He was saying it was fun and frightening at the same time
wow.
because he knew that that was something that she would remember. He knew it was something that would identify something that there's no way I could know
Yes.
and let her know that it was really him with
Yeah.
his spirit with whom we were conversing.
Mm.
And it put a smile on her face and made her laugh, which I'll see a lot. Spirit will do that.
Yeah.
They'll say things that will make their loved ones laugh because they want them to be happy. They
Yes.
don't want them to be moping around,
Yes.
grieving for them. They want them to go on with their lives because life is for the living.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's funny you bring that up. The first I've had experiences with psychics in the past just from random interactions where they, came up to me and just told me things. But the first one that I sought out for, she told me, she connected me with my grandmother right away. And she told me that it was one of the very first things that came out of her mouth. She said, you used to follow your grandmother's hands. And for most people, that wouldn't mean anything or be a big deal. And this, when I say there's like, I can't think of anything more intimate that she could, personal and intimate. I mean, I loved my grandmother's hands. I loved her nail polish. If I'm wearing nail polish, it's pink or red only. And that's because that's all she wore. And she knew I loved her hands, but no, I didn't even realize how much she would write. And I mean, I would literally sit and just watch her hands. Whatever she was doing, cooking, laundry, whatever. I just loved her hands. And I did not realize how much I did until she said that to me, and how much I mean it hit me on a level that I mean she couldn't have said anything better for me to just be all in. It's
Yeah.
incredible. And it usually is something random,
Right.
that you wouldn't like. Yeah. Again, as someone, if I'm sure if my brother was sitting next to me and heard that, he would be like, this lady doesn't have grandma. This lady is
Yeah.
not, I don't know who she's communicating with, but it's not grandma. And it like it just, yeah, it's so interesting. I reached out to you. I had a terrible reaction to the vaccine. I don't know if you remember this or not, but I had gone to every doctor you can think of, ear, nose, and throat, chiropractors. I had MRIs done. I mean, because I was just having the most bizarre symptoms after the vaccine. And every doctor I saw looked at me like I had 12 heads. I mean, I was getting nowhere. For the first time ever, I had nosebleeds. I couldn't smell. The ENT told me to get nasal spray. I was like, okay, this is not gonna help me. Um, I had nowhere to go. And then I saw you, I think it was Next Level Soul or maybe Jeff Mara, one of them, and you were talking to you, maybe you were just talking about your ability to be a medical intuitive. And I thought, well, why not? I'll give it a shot. You had like a 4 month waiting list. You guys were able to get me in there way sooner than I was expecting. And I I asked you just to do a scan, and you ended up confirming that I was having a reaction to, I think it was a dye that was in the Pfizer vaccine. Then you brought up my gut microbiome, which I ended up getting looked at later after, and that changed so much for me. And you also brought up mold. And this was all from you being on the other side of a screen, me telling you nothing, and you just doing a medical scan of me. So
Mhm.
please, yeah, please tell us what's going on there, how you're able to do that, because you can do that with both people and animals.
Yeah. And I don't even think we were on a screen. I think we were on a phone call.
I actually, you're right. We were.
Yeah.
We were.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I am a medical intuitive and energy healer, and I'm like a human MRI. And this is what I teach. Everybody has the ability, you know this from
Yes.
going through the class. Everybody has the ability. It's just a matter of developing and enhancing it. I
Mm.
learned how to do it, So I raise my vibrational level. I connect into you energetically. It's like I'm looking at an X-ray or a CT scan or an MRI. I have a hologram of you in my mind's eye. And I can see in my mind's eye broken bones, viral infections, bacterial infections, mold, other kinds of different diseases, cancer, broken bones, torn ligaments, that kind of stuff. And then there's an energetic healing that always happens. So when I have somebody calling into my show, I do my Ask Julie Ryan show on Thursday nights at 8 Eastern, and people call in from all over. And, can you scan this? My shoulder hurts. Can you check on Fluffy? Fluffy seems lethargic, and Fluffy's a Pekingese or something dog. And can we talk to my dead grandma? Yeah. Can we do a past life thing? Can you tell how close to death somebody is? And that's all part of the buffet of psychicness that we all have the ability to do once we connect with spirit. So with you, since you brought it up, what I saw a lot of mold in your system. And I
Mhm.
said to you, where have you had a water leak? Where's the mold? In your home, in your office? What's going on? I don't remember what you told me.
It was the condo that my ex he had already bought a condo, and we were living in that, and it
Was
was
moldy.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yeah. And it
Didn't
was
know
making
that.
you sick, and I could see it in my
Yes.
mind's eye. So the energetic healing was, let's clear this out of your body, which I watched happen. And then I could see that you'd had one of the COVID shots. And so we cleared that out. And then whenever there's mold, there's always yeast overgrowth. So we cleared that out. We stitched up your leaky gut. And
Mm-hmm.
then that healing has already happened on the energetic level. And then it's going to integrate into your body. And that can happen instantly. It can take days, weeks, months, may need some kind of complementary care like change in diet, physical therapy, whatever. But it's always our spirit's prerogative to utilize the healing in a way that best facilitates whatever it is we're exploring in this lifetime.
Mm.
And nobody ever heals anybody else. How many doctors did you go to?
I'm not kidding. It was probably 20 different kinds of doctors.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But like,
And
and there was multiple within each kind. Like I went to a couple of chiropractors. You know what I mean? Like it was
yeah.
all over across the board.
Well, and you go to one specialty and they send you to another specialty. And the problem with that is a lot of times they're not communicating with one another.
Mhm.
They're all siloed in
Mhm.
the medical business. And it's important, I think, for us to understand that nobody heals anybody else. We heal
Yeah.
ourselves. No
Yes.
doctor, no medical provider, no healer like me. I'm helping you heal yourself. And so as I'm watching the energetic healing in my mind's eye, I describe it to you. And as you know, some of my analogies are hilarious.
Yes.
And that is honestly how they just come into my head because spirit gives me a way to communicate it to you that's going to go along with your life's experience from a frame of reference standpoint.
Mm.
And like if you were a chef, I might talk to you in a recipe format. If you're a lumberjack, I may talk to you in something, some kind of a fungus on a tree in the woods. It's hilarious how
That is
stuff comes in.
too
And
funny.
spirit is really funny,
Yes.
really funny. We're supposed to have fun when we're doing this stuff because spirit's pure
Yes.
love.
Yes.
So that happens and there's a healing. And then what I do, the work that I do, and most of the work that I do has to do with healing. I would say 90+% of the people with whom I work are calling in about a medical issue.
Mm.
And so there's always a combination of spirituality and practicality to help the person heal, to help the person get over grief, to help the person with whatever. And
Mm.
so, as I said with you, okay, the healing's happened on the energetic level. Now, here's what we need to do on the human level to help it integrate.
Yes.
Let's do a gut biome test to find out what foods are going to be perfect for you. And and the beauty is so oftentimes, Ellie, I'll talk to people that have talked to many different medical providers and they don't have a sense of hope.
Yeah.
And like in a situation like you, and you think, am I losing my mind? Because I
Yes.
got all these symptoms that are seemingly not related, when in essence they are all related.
Yeah.
But the doctors aren't trained to look for mold.
Mm-mm.
And that was first thing that showed up on my
Mm.
radar with you. And so we can say, okay, here's what's going on. Here are the steps you can take. And oh, by the way, here's a provider that understands this that can help you.
Yes.
And so that's where we go from that. And it's all downloads. It's all divine downloads that I'm led to share. And it's so interesting and so much fun and so rewarding. Yeah, anybody that wants a copy of my book, Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next, I'll send you a free copy. All you have to do is just go to julieryangift.com, and tell us that you heard me on Allie's show. And I have children's books that are darling, and these are illustrated children's books that talk about angel messages for dogs, for cats, for kids, for truth. Those are fun. Other books that you can find, everything's at askjulieryan.com.
I love it.
So my shows every Thursday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. We're on all the podcast networks. We're on YouTube. And then we release 3 additional interview shows a week. So we're releasing 4 shows a week now.
Mm.
So
I
lots to
love
catch
it.
up on.
I
Yeah.
will put your links to everything in the description. And guys, I can vouch the book Angelic Attendance is amazing. Your children's books are amazing. I have all of your books. In fact, you don't
Oh,
know this, but you inspired me to write my own children's book.
oh,
And yeah, I mean, truly, your work is just it's amazing. It really is.
oh,
It really
oh.
is.
Thank you. If you want to learn how to do the buffet of psychicness, come meet us in Atlanta the November 1st through the 3rd. We're going to be at the Kimpton Hotel. And like Allie and I, you'll be able to access the buffet of psychicness. And everybody can do this. The training is a blast, right, Allie?
So
It's
much fun.
so much fun and is can be life-changing.
Absolutely.
And the other thing is just go to askjulieryan.com and you'll see angelic attendant training. And so
Mm,
come join us in Atlanta.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Ah, thank you so much, Julie. Thank
You
you.
are most welcome. What an honor to be with you.